Thanks, Caitlin, and hello, everyone. We're going to spend the next about 45 minutes talking about why Dynamics GP 2013 users should consider upgrading. Some of this you've heard from us in the past if you have been at any of our presentations since last fall. And so really the kind of the agenda, if you will, the key topics we're going to talk about is when support ends for 2013. And again, some of you may have seen these dates already. We're going to talk about some of the issues if you do decide to stay on 2013 and you're on payroll, since this is kind of a payroll centric topic today, although we'll talk about a lot of other things other than payroll. So we'll talk about what you can expect if you stay, and then what some of the benefits might be if you do decide to go ahead and upgrade. So really three kind of short things here, and we'll look at some of the, under the benefits, we'll look at some of the things that have been added to the software since GP 2013. And so you will get a feel for not every feature, but some of the features. So the first issue is the support end dates, and you'll notice GP 2013 mainstream support ends April 10th. And so if I calculated right this morning, that's 53 days. And tax updates, since we're talking a lot about payroll tax updates end on 4/18, and so you would have all received the new law changes. So the tax withholding changes for federal income tax that are in place now, kind of went into effect February 1st. Those updates are available, and so you would be current if you downloaded those. So you're in good shape today, but in about 58 days from now, there won't be any more payroll tax updates. And so, we'll talk more about what that means in a minute here, but just keep that in mind. And that's kind of for payroll customers, that's kind of the key time frame to keep in mind, which is why I have it in red there. So back to support. Mainstream support ends April 10th. Extended support in the middle column there ends in 2023. So you have about another 5 years for extended support. And so we get a question a lot on, well, what's mainstream and what's extended? And so I've got on the right side of the screen there on the slide, you can see, of course, the mainstream support, and those things in the mainstream support column, those will go away in 53 days. You will have continue to have extended support for another 5 years. So what's that mean? Well, you could call Microsoft and pay for support, and so they will continue to support with paid support for 5 years. Of course, you can still call us, and so a lot of people don't call Microsoft; they call us, and we will continue to support GP 2013 for that same time period. And so you wouldn't be without support, so you're not going to be completely bare, as they say. But payroll is going to be the issue here. And so so back to the chart here, security update support. You'll notice that if there are security vulnerabilities that Microsoft finds in the software, and so a vulnerability means that there's some kind of breach that Microsoft or an end user has determined that there's a hole in the system for people to get through it, Microsoft will fix those through the 2023 extended support date. And so that's very, very rare with Microsoft Dynamics. In fact, I'm not sure I've ever heard of a documented case where there's a security breach in the Dynamics GP product. Usually it's in Internet Explorer or Edge or kind of the back end things that are connected to the web, like web service or Internet Information Server, or some of those products that kind of sit on the edge of the firewall, so to speak, so connect more up to the internet. But should there be something that GP 2013 has, comes up with that is security related, they will fix those. Again, I don't know of any cases where that's happened, but you are still covered there. So what you do lose those, though, are hot fixes, and so kind of like service packs that are not security related, so those will go away. If you have support with Microsoft where you're not paying today, that would end, so you wouldn't be able to call for free anymore. Warranty claims, that's don't see too much of that in Dynamics GP. But the last thing there in the lined box there, the design changes and feature request, that goes away. So mainstream support means no more features into 2013. Actually, there's really no more features been put into 2013 for some time, but that's where the payroll tax changes get delivered, is through that line item. And so, of course, product-specific information that's available online, so on the knowledge base, so on customer source, and of course, you can pretty much Google any support topic now and find third-party information, but you would still have access to customer source through 2023, and even beyond that point, I don't know that they specifically go try to take the 2013 data out of customer source. There's still stuff in there from GP version 7 and 8 and 10 and so forth that you see. So that then the knowledge base in customer source or partner sources will be out there. You know, my word is indefinitely. That's not Microsoft's word, but it doesn't really go away. And so any other Microsoft sites that have links to or information on Dynamics, again, the websites aren't going to call out the 2013 data and delete it. And so so that's kind of really where things stand. Now, I did put up here the 2015, 2016, and 2018 support dates, so you can kind of, if you're on 2013, you can kind of see, you know, it wouldn't really make sense to upgrade from 2013 to 2015 because you're only buying a couple of years in doing that. We do have a lot of people upgrading from 2013 to 2016, and of course 2018 being the most current version of Microsoft Dynamics is generally where you would go, but some people do stop at 2016 and they are buying a little bit of time there. And so okay, so that's kind of how support works. So some issues, potential issues, not everybody would have this. If you do stay on 2013 past the support date, well, the big one is support, which we just talked about. No new features, which I've mentioned, so nothing else coming. And part of the no new features then is no payroll updates. And so what's that mean exactly? Well, if there's tax law changes, Microsoft will not program those into GP 2013 after April. So, you know, if there's a W-2 format change, which there generally seems to be every couple of years, or a W-3 format change, you would not get those from Microsoft. Some of you probably know that you can actually open those forms in Report Writer and make your own changes to the layout. Sometimes that works okay if just boxes move around and so on. I know years ago the employee social security number used to be in a different spot on the W-2. It used to be up kind of in the top left. Now it's more in towards the middle of the form. And so a change like that, you know, we could actually do in Report Writer, and then the W-2 would still work. What might be a little harder is if a box gets added to the W-2 or the W-3 or the 1099 or the 1096, if the IRS adds things to those forms, or, you know, maybe they have a new code for a deduction or a benefit or something, that's where it gets a little more problematic, where, you know, if that data is not in the system, rearranging the boxes in Report Writer doesn't fix that. That's just taking the data we have and moving it to fit the new IRS layout. And so, you know, occasionally that will happen where something does get added to the system and we're unable to accommodate that. So for example, if you've been doing payroll for a few years, you know that this surcharge or surtax that has been imposed for employees that make over 200,000. We charge more Medicare tax for people that make over 200,000 a year. And so that's not necessarily a W-2 layout problem, but when that law came in a couple of years ago and we had to start doing that, of course, Microsoft tailored the system to be able to accommodate that. Well, when we got to the W-2, if we were on an older version and we didn't have the current service pack, and I think this was a GP2013 problem, so if someone was on an older version, when the W-2s printed, they stopped the FICA wages, the Medicare wages. They printed the wrong amounts because the software didn't really know that we're going beyond the limit, so to speak, in surcharging some of this additional money. And so there was a little fix that 2013 had to be able to print the correct Medicare wages and FICA wages, but of course the older versions, they couldn't do that. And so, sometimes there's a law change that isn't form related, where we can't just put something in a different spot on the piece of paper that prints. Is there something in the system that just won't work? And so those are some things that we have to kind of be careful of. Of course, Affordable Care Act law changes. I'm not sure where that's going. We thought that might go away in 2017. It hasn't. We're still printing 1095s. That may change to the point that we don't have to print 1095s anymore. I don't know. I think it's kind of up in the air. But if there's an Affordable Care Act change that needs to get programmed into the Dynamics payroll or HR system, you would not, of course, be able to get those. And so, something that significant, you would have to do an Excel or have somebody else do for you. You wouldn't be able to handle that with GP 2013. And so those are the types of things that we want to make sure that you don't get caught on. Rearranging forms is one thing, but law changes that take program code updates in the software, you'd kind of be dead in the water there. And so that's probably the biggest thing as far as the software itself, especially around payroll. Now, on the right side of the screen, sometimes people miss the fact that this is all running on SQL Server, and these SQL versions get outdated as well. I would say most people that are on GP 2013 are probably running on top of SQL Server 2008, maybe 2008 R2. And so that's another set of problems that actually is already upon us. SQL 2008 R2 is already off support for 2.5 years already. And so, well, you might say, well, I'm not on 2008. I upgraded. I'm on SQL 2012 or SQL 2014. Well, notice the dates that SQL Server version has gone off support. The only thing left in SQL 2012-14 that is still being supported is SQL 2012 Service Pack 3, and that support ends early October of this year. Every other version of SQL that GP 2013 ran on has already expired, meaning it's off support. And so GP might be humming along just fine, but if you have a SQL Server crash or you have a problem kind of at the database side, your IT folks or our support people, we cannot call Microsoft and get support for the database side of this. And so that's potentially a bigger issue than the actual software, because most of GP, even though it goes off support in April, GP 2013 is not going to stop working. It's not going to shut off the day after. It'll run indefinitely. But if you have a database issue or there's a vulnerability, and so we get back to the security, if Microsoft or someone else identified a vulnerability in SQL Server, which is rare, but could happen, more likely to happen there than it would happen in GP. Those SQL versions that GP 2013 sits on unless you're on SQL 2012 Service Pack 3, those vulnerability patches would not be delivered. And so that's really a bigger concern, I think, than the actual accounting application. And so those are potential problems if you decide to just sit tight, and you might say, well, it's working fine, I'm just gonna ride it out. Just be aware that there's more to it than just GP running along fine for you. Okay, so other considerations. Well, a lot of people will say, I don't want to spend the money to upgrade, and so I'm gonna skip a few versions. I'm on 2013, it's running fine. I'll wait maybe until 2020 or whatever the next version that comes out. I'll wait and then I'll kind of do it all at once. And that's maybe more common than what most people think, is you do skip around, and so that's okay. But people will do that thinking, well, I'm going to save some money because I'm not going to upgrade to every version, and so that seems to be logical, except when they do upgrade and now we have to go 3 versions up. Well, you don't really save any money. You might write the check in a different year or a different accounting period, but the cost to do 3 upgrades sometimes is more than the cost to just do an upgrade from version to version, to go from 2013 to 2015, for example. The cost to go from 2013 to 2018 could actually many times be higher, more expensive to do that all at once. And so, we do hear people, it's like, well, I just don't want to spend the money right now, and so I'm going to wait. But then when they do it, it's a much bigger cost, because we have to go 2, 3, 4 versions sometimes into the future. And so there's not a huge benefit of skipping like that if you're just looking at cost. I know we had one just 2 or 3 weeks ago that the customer was on GP2010 and wanted to be current, and so they decided the 2016 R2 was current enough. They had some third parties that were not quite ready to be on 2018. So 2010 to 2013, there's 2015 in there, 2016, and of course you've got all the R2 versions. You don't have to do all those, but so their 2010 had to be brought up to a current service pack, so that's basically an upgrade. So there's one upgrade, and then to get from 2010 over to 2013 or 15, there's a second upgrade, and then to get from there over to 2016 was 3 upgrades, and had they gone to 2018, potentially it could have been a 4th step in there. And so the kind of bleeds into the next one is the time. You don't want to be down for a little bit, and so you just don't want to take the time to upgrade. And so if you do get into these multiple step upgrades where you have to do several hops or several steps to get current, that balloons up the time that it takes, of course, because you have to chunk through all that data. And so this company that I was mentioning from 2010 to 2016 R2, instead of having maybe a half or 2/3 of a day to be out of the system, they were out of the system 3 days, because all this had to happen to get them current. And so you might rearrange the time, but you don't really save any time by letting things go. And so just a couple of little plugs there that sometimes people feel like we don't have time to do it, or we don't really want to spend the money now. Well, so really you're deferring the chunk of time you need, or you're deferring the cost. You're not saving anything really by skipping versions, and definitely not saving any time to skip. And so just keep that in the back of your mind. So how do we, if we're on 2013, how do we get current? And so two real ways. If you're on 2013, you can't go directly to 2018. You're too far outdated. And so from 2013, if you wanted to end up on 2018, you would have to go either to 2015 or to 2016. And then you could go on to 2018. And so again, that's kind of one of those multiple steps or multi-hop kind of upgrades because you can't go direct. Now, if you're on 2013 and you just want to go to 2016, that you can do. And so you might have a service pack that needs to be applied to your 2013 to get it somewhat current, depending on how old your 2013 really is. But there is a direct connection from 13 to 16. And so the worst case would be a service pack of 2013 and then on to 2016, and in 2016 meaning R2, the most current version of 16. And so up to you if you are considering an upgrade, depending on what you use in the system and any third-party products, then you know, 2016 might be an okay landing place. But if you're if you want to go all the way and be kind of leading edge current, then certainly 2018 is the place to land. Okay, so now we kind of talk about benefits. So why do this? Because, you know, let's face it, it does take some money and it does take some time, and it can be painful if you know, it's just like anything else. So you have a little bit of time to be offline, hopefully not too much, but try to do these most of the time after hours, evenings or weekends and so on. But you know, people have to kind of test the new system and make sure that everything works. And so it is, you know, a little bit of an interruption, but you know, it can be minimized. So here's really the biggest benefits, I think, of upgrading. And so, well, it's the reverse of the problem slide. So the problems that we looked at a minute ago, it's just kind of the reverse of that. And so that kind of goes without saying. But, you know, the new versions, there's always productivity gains to be had in newer software. And so Microsoft, based on user suggestions and things that they hear at events and partners like us telling them and customers like you telling them that, hey, if this could work a little different, this would really be nice. And so a lot of things that go into the software come from those suggestions, and a lot of those suggestions are around how to be more productive, how to keep the mouse clicks at a absolute bare minimum. We don't, any of us need practice clicking the mouse. We all kind of know how that works. And so productivity is always a stamp on a new version. Anywhere, anytime access with the new web client that is based on HTML5 versus Silverlight, like the old web client. HTML5, you may know, runs on anything. So any device. If you want to run GP on your iPad or your iPhone or your Android tablet, whatever it might be, the web client, HTML5 web client in GP2016 R2 and 2018 will allow you to run GP anywhere. So it's totally agnostic now to the hardware and the operating system. And so sometimes, you know, you want to be able to walk around the factory or the showroom, or be on the beach with your iPad and log in and take a look at the financial data. So hopefully you don't have to spend too much time doing that, but that's a good way to do that. And of course, 2013 had the Silverlight web client, which was very limited in what it ran on, Windows-only devices, and was a little clunky. Well, it's been completely rewritten, and so that's I think a benefit to upgrade if you have a need to do that. Of course, kind of along with the productivity, there's always ways to streamline your processes and do things easier and quicker. Better reporting, you know, that gets better and more expanded on every version with Excel reports, with business intelligence, whether it's SQL reports, or now we're moving a lot into the Power BI style reporting. And so, in fact, I think I have one. I'll just kind of show you a Power BI report running inside of GP. And so the reports get, you know, not the old original GP off the menu reports that don't drill down or back. They're just putting something on paper, not those necessarily, but the new way to report. So always have enhancements there. And then of course your investment. If you continue to pay maintenance on the software every year and you skip upgrades, you know, you kind of want to stay on the maintenance so you can get whatever version you do want to upgrade to. But if you're not getting those features that are, you know, your money is going to help fund, then you're kind of losing out on your investment. And so you know, most people, they want something back for that enhancement or that maintenance that they pay every year. And then the last thing I put on here is evaluation of the cloud. So sometimes people will not upgrade because they have to buy a new server, they have to upgrade their SQL, and so those two things alone can be much more costly than upgrading. You know, a server can be fairly expensive, SQL server, depending on how many users you have connecting. SQL software itself can be pricey. And so, you know, between a new machine and new operating system and new SQL Server database, you know, you can have a fair amount of money. And so it's not the few $1,000s to upgrade GP, it's the, you know, $25,000 or $30,000 to put the new server in place. Not everybody is on board with that. And so that is a time that, you know, you might at least have a conversation about what it would mean and take to maybe have this hosted by Microsoft and let them worry about the hardware and the SQL licenses and so forth, and you just get the GP from them when you need to log in every day. And it doesn't have to be Microsoft. Most people realize that, you know, Microsoft will host it for you, but we can put that anywhere you like. Any data center that you have a relationship with can host GP. And so that's a consideration as well, especially if you are on some of the older SQL, the SQL 2008, where you have to rebuy, and, you know, if you had 25 or 50 users, that can be a pretty expensive undertaking. And so sometimes just renting that stuff from Microsoft makes more sense. You don't have to write big checks every few years when you do need to upgrade. You just pay them a monthly fee, and they'll provide servers, and they'll provide places for your backup, and they'll provide the power and the internet and the SQL licenses, and we just take your GP license and just park it over there. So you still keep paying your maintenance just like you have been. So you're not losing anything that you purchased as far as Dynamics GP. You just move where it's actually being hosted. And so, all right. So then the last thing we'll spend some time on here is talking about what has been added to the system, kind of from a high level in GP 2015, GP 2016, and GP 2018. And so, and of course they all had, except 2018, there's a GP 2015 R2, there's a 2016 R2. And so if you count those, there's really 5 versions of the software that you're behind if you're on GP 2013 today. And so you're missing 5 releases that have new features. And so I've pulled some that I think are applicable to most people. Not every single feature is listed here. There's always a few that apply to a fewer subset kind of the installed base, but here are kind of the big things. So in GP 2015, there's new workflow added for payables transaction approval. So now you can approve an individual transaction before it actually gets posted into the vendor account and ready to be paid. In 2015, if you want to attach documents that get sent along with approval, so it could be, in this case, could be a payables transaction, it could be a purchase requisition, could be a purchase order. If you've attached documents to those transactions, those documents that you have, they can actually be sent along through email to the approver, so the approver can see documents that you've attached inside of GP. And so typically the approvals are done through email. They don't have to be, but that's usually how they're done. And so that was a nice feature. Reporting, some simple things. They've rearranged the debits and the credits for Smart List and Excel reports. The credits always appeared on the right. Well, no, they appeared on on the left and the debits appeared on the right. And if you have an accounting background, that should be just opposite. And so if you're not an accountant, you didn't know any better. If you are an accountant, that has driven you crazy. Even though you don't know it, that did drive you crazy. Debits are always on the left. And so that's the first thing you learn in accounting school. And so they finally, after many, many years, fixed that. So the accounting folks can maybe sleep a little better. There's a historical received not invoice report. So if you deal with purchasing and inventory, you know that when you receive something, it goes into a kind of a temporary payables account until you get the invoice, and then it flips to accounts payable. Well, there was a invoice, received not invoice report that you could run that supported the balance in that temporary accounts payable account. But that was for today. So you'd run the report and it literally was as of the date you run it. Now you can print a historical received not invoice report. And so that was a really big thing for people that are in the distribution business to help kind of reconcile that balance of that accrued purchases or accrued payable, so to speak, before it's truly an accounts payable. Payroll people. I could have put this one over on the right under payroll, but it is kind of a reporting thing. You can mask the Social Security number on payroll reports. So check registers, the employee direct deposit earnings statement, as it's called in the system. A lot of times nowadays we don't want Social Security numbers out on paper somewhere, and so that can be masked out with just a checkbox, and there's a whole laundry list of reports that you can mask that off. Virtually any place that shows up on a printed report, you can mask it out. And so that was it's a small thing, but it's a huge thing if you do payroll in the system. If you have analytical accounting, there's a new transaction list that they've created. So for AA users, that's been pretty helpful. And then they've combined the general ledger inquiry. So if you remember, well, in 2013, if you go in to do a GL inquiry, you either have to pick open off the menu or you have to pick historical off the menu. Well, those menu choices have been consolidated into one. It's just GL inquiry. And when you get into the window, you can pick any year you want. So there's not an open historical menu choice. It's the same window. And again, it's not a feature per se, but it's a huge productivity thing where you can see all your GL data now in one window just by picking the year. Purchasing, they've created a nice all-in-one view where you can see everything to do with purchasing and sales. So vendors and customers, we can see POs, we can see receipts, we can see invoices, we can see payments, we can see returns. In sales, we can see sales documents, so orders, quotes, invoices, we can see payments, we can see credit memos. If a customer returns something, we can see that all in one screen. If you do use those modules today, you know that getting to information in the inquiry windows it's there, but it's a little bit clunky the way it's organized. The all-in-one view really is a big upgrade to getting to the data quicker. You can automatically deposit cash receipts, so you don't have to do the separate deposit. So if you do a cash receipt, you can set it to automatically go to bank reconciliation instead of doing the extra deposit step, if you so choose. And in 2015, they added the ability to email any purchase order document and any sales order document. So it can all be sent out through email. And then in payroll, the employee self-service user was introduced. And so ESS, we call it, employee self-service user, which is a very low level user, has a very low cost. It's $60 one time, and then your annual maintenance on that. And it is a named user, so every person, it's Joe gets Joe's user and Bob gets Bob's user. It's not just a pool of users that people can share, because we have to know who these guys are. So they actually can log into GP with this very low-level user. They could enter time into GP. They could enter project time. So if you're entering time and expenses into project accounting, the employee self-service user works for that, and they can create a purchase requisition. And so they're pretty much limited to those functions, but at a very low cost. Well, because they can log into GP, Microsoft gave them the ability to get a copy of their W-2 right off their homepage. So in theory, in GP 2016, you would not really ever have to print W-2s. If you did the Mag Media filing, and the employee could go to their homepage in the system and print a W-2, and I mean with lines and boxes and looks like the IRS form. First time in the history of Dynamics GP that a W-2 has actually been imaged in the system. And so they can print that as many times as they need it. So if they're at the bank on Saturday applying for a car loan and they need their last couple of W-2s, well, in theory, they would be able to log right in and retrieve that and email it to the loan officer or whatever it was and be done with it. So, and then there's a time management app. So an app meaning it runs on any device. So if on your iPhone, you wanted to download this app and have people enter time, enter a request for vacation or other PTO, they could do that on an app that's free in any of the stores for any of the platforms. Okay, so 2016, just a couple of things here. This is where the web client was converted to HTML5, which allows it to run on any piece of hardware and pretty much any browser. It runs on Safari, Chrome, Internet Explorer, Edge, and so on. Batch approvals now have the ability to send a Word template along for the edit list. So if we're going to request a GL batch be approved through email, we can send the edit list in Word form along with that approval request out to the email address, and so that then the person that opens that email can actually open the Word attachment and see the edit list of what's in the batch. And so that's kind of a nice feature. Another kind of a big one is numbers that get exported to Excel, and Excel should be capitalized there. They actually export as numbers now, and so they're not text. They actually look like numbers when they get to Excel. That's kind of a nice feature. Power BI, I mentioned earlier, the link to Power BI now on your GP homepage has been added. You can password protect smart list favorites, and the old message, this batch is being edited by another user, that you might see from time to time. The message has been adjusted so that it'll say this batch is being edited by Brian instead of by another user, and that's fine if you have 3 users all kind of in the same room. But if you have 100 users spread out over across the globe or across the country, this batch is being edited by another user and there's 100 users logged in today, that doesn't really help us. So it'll actually give us the username. And then some financial things here. Kind of the third one down, payables batch payment option. There's a credit card now as a payment option for a batch instead of just EFT and check. And so the system will now do a better job of tracking credit card payments. Auto deposit cash receipts, I talked about that a little bit. Let's see, the second from the bottom, link credit card invoices to original. So if we do pay vendor invoices with a credit card, if you've ever done that, you know that the system then creates an invoice into the credit card vendor and pays the original vendor invoice off with that credit card, creates the liability to American Express, for example, and so then we have an open voucher to be paid to American Express. Well, when we look back at the original vendor and we look for the payment, we see it was paid with American Express. You know, that was good, but we didn't have much information there, and so now there's a link where when we look at the vendor and we see the invoice was paid with Amex, it actually has a link to where that voucher was created by the system to the Amex vendor that we can drill back and see that, oh yes, that was actually put into American Express as an open voucher. And then the last thing on financial here is we have the ability to remove history from the bank rec module. Oops, that's going the wrong way. And so a couple other things in 16, there's some distribution enhancements there, some project accounting, which that's probably been the most things added to project accounting in the last several versions. But if you look over on the right, you'll see the payroll enhancement. We can inactive pay codes and lookups. And so inactivating a pay code and lookup means when we look up a list, whether it's an employee or a master file, if there's an inactive pay code, it doesn't have to show up in the list. And so if you have people that kind of use a lot of different pay codes over time, and you go in to look at some of that history, well, all those inactive codes are in there. You can check a box and make sure that they don't show up. They don't disappear, of course, but they don't have to show up in your lookups. If you want to see them, you uncheck, and then you'll see the inactives again. Payroll posting account setup, that's good if you're just going onto the system, more so than if you've been on and doing payroll for a while. The third one down is kind of a big one too. We track history on terminated and rehired employee dates. And so we have, if people come and go a lot, certain industries that happens, well, we have a whole history now on their rehire, their termination date. And so we can see all kind of those ins and outs of that employee. So it's not just on the employee maintenance card where we have a date. We didn't have much room there to really track people that kind of came and went, but we do now in a brand new screen. And then the payroll administrator. So if you have payroll security in GP, you can actually print reports for an employee. So what's that mean? Well, if you remember, we added a W-2 that we could actually, it's an image of a W-2 back in 2015. Well, in 2016, they added the ability for some payroll GP user to actually go in and print the employee's W-2 for them. And so because that employee self-service user is named, so we know who they are, so we give them the right W-2 when they log in. Well, the payroll person, so if you're the person that does payroll, you can actually go print a W-2 for any person as that person and send it to them. And so, and again, it's the imaged form, which is the first time in 2015 that has shown up in the system. And then we get over to GP2013. There's some productivity enhancements. System password, you don't have to type that in every time you go into a system menu as long as GP's open. Once you close GP down, then that system password cache where that's saved is flushed out. You log back into GP, you'll have to re-enter the system password if you go into anything on the system menu. But as long as you're in the session, it'll remember that. Some nice enhancements on workflow there that they continue to really put some nice things in there and really kind of beef up the workflow that's part of the software. Over on the right at the top there, probably the biggest thing, but simple, but really been favored among users, is adding some new sorting abilities to the receivables and the payables inquiries. And so the 4 windows, transaction inquiry by customer, by document, and then by vendor and by document for payables. Lots of different sorting abilities there now, and also in the bank reconciliation window. So those, if you haven't seen the GP 2018 product tour, sign up for the next one coming up, or you can find it out on our YouTube channel and watch one that we did earlier this year. And so you'll see kind of how some of those things work. Some financial enhancements down there. A popular one is the first one there, where you can print a statement now from the customer maintenance window. You don't have to go into the routines and actually generate a statement. You can do it right from the customer window. So if you have that window open for any reason, you want to just look at their statement, you could. Of course, from there, you could send it out to them through email. Some few things on the distribution side, some new reports and so forth, but I do want to concentrate on the payroll side here on the right. We now have the ability to set up, to roll down setup options and decide if we want active or inactive records or both. And it's not quite that way. We can do all payroll records, or we can just do active. So you wouldn't necessarily want to just do inactive. So, and that's for pay codes, deductions, benefits, and shift shift codes, and I'm actually going to show you a screenshot here in a slide or two as we kind of wrap up. You'll see some of these new features, and this is 2018, so might be a good reason if you're thinking of getting to 2016 or 18 and you do payroll. There's some nice things in 2018. You can turn off the garnishments report. That report printed, if you had garnishments, that report printed every time you posted payroll, whether you wanted it or not. Well, you can now turn it off. They've added the ability to change the department code. So I'll show you what that screen looks like. And then of course the restriction of inactive deductions and benefits in lookups, where if I have a benefit or deduction that's inactive, you don't necessarily want to see that every time you look at my deductions or benefits, so you can restrict the list to those things that are just active. Okay, so a couple of screenshots here and then we're done. This is a very bad picture, very blurry picture of Power BI running inside of Dynamics GP. And so you see a big chart there kind of on my home page, and then some charts and graphs over on the right. And so this is kind of the next step of reporting. And Power BI for the most part is free. There are some, well, there's one paid version that if the free version just doesn't get you everything you want, you might have to advance to the paid version, but the paid version is only $9.99 a month per user. And so if you had 10 users, $10 a month per user, that's $100 a month for 10 full users of Power BI. And if that's not something you've taken a look at, that's you might start to inquire of that a little bit. I think we're going to do a whole Power BI webinar here coming up in the next couple of months, and we'll really spend a whole hour on how that works and how we get that to work with GP, and so that you can have what you see here on my screen. Okay, some of those payroll things in 2018, the garnishment report, that's added to the list of reports in our posting setup. So I can go in and either shut it off, or I can send it just like any other report. I can send it to the printer, the screen, or I can ask, and so on. That has been omitted from this window until now. Okay, so here's the roll down. This one I think is one of the nicer ones. So if we make a change to, in this case, my 401k deduction, we change anything about it, you know how that works, so you get the roll down message. You want to be careful on answering that, as you probably know, or maybe learned the hard way. But here's where we can say I want to go update everybody in the system, or I want to update just my active records. And so if I make a change, I might not want to go into inactive employees and roll this down, or if this deduction has been inactivated on a current active employee, I don't necessarily want to change that inactive deduction code. And so this works on pay codes, deductions, benefits, and shift codes. And so that's that was a really highly requested feature from the users. And so here's the tool, the professional services tool library tool to change payroll codes. We've been able to change pay. We've been able to change benefit codes. Deduction codes, we can now, in 2018, we can change department codes. And so if you want to rename your departments, you can do that. And if you've used these tools, you know how they work. That goes throughout the entire system and changes that code wherever it shows up. So all your history, everybody that currently is assigned that code, it changes it, overwrites it, and it looks like the new code has always been the way that it was from day one. And so these are very powerful, very nice tools to have. They're all completely free. So if you haven't heard of these before, these are free from 2013 on, 2015, 2016, 2018. There's a variety of tools that you can use to kind of make changes to things that otherwise have been locked down. And then here's the restriction for benefits and deductions if I wanted to restrict off inactive benefits or deduction codes in my lookups. It's really just a drop down there of the little black down arrow where you go in and do that just like you would in customers and vendors and items and GL accounts and so forth. That's pretty much throughout payroll and HR now. So check that out if you haven't. And then lastly is just the roadmap. So you see where GP 2018 is way over third from the right there, shipped out December 1st. We're expecting sometime this calendar year for GP 20, whatever it's going to be called. It might be 2018 R2. It might be, might have another name we haven't heard yet. It might be GP 2019. That is scheduled to release when it says have to up there, that means probably really late this year. So I would expect this to maybe be December of this calendar year to have the next version. Sometimes if they're running a little late, it might be early next, but we haven't heard yet. It's too early to tell. And so they're diligently working on the next version of the product for us. Another reason why you don't want to get too far behind is Microsoft is releasing a kind of a major version every calendar year or thereabouts every 12 to 14 months. And so you don't want to get too far back. And so if you see this slide, 2013 really isn't even on here anymore because there's been so many major releases since 2013. And so those are the releases with new features that you've been missing if you're still back on 13. Okay, with that, Caitlin, I think we're about out of material and out of time. Any questions that are popping up there we can talk about?
Sure. I was going to say we had a couple questions that showed up during the presentation. The first one is, do you have to upgrade to 2016 or can you go directly to 2018?
So if you're on 13, you cannot go directly to 18. If you're on 2013, you would have to go to either 2015 or 2016 and then on to 2018 to be completely current with where Microsoft is. So 13 is too old now to go directly to 18. So you have a double upgrade, but you know, it's doable, but you do have 2 upgrades now to get current.
Okay, and then our other question is 2018 compatible with SQL 2017?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so those were the questions that we had. Just kind of keeping an eye on the question box to see if there's anything else that comes in. But since we're at the end of the hour, I think we can, yeah.
Yeah, and if I've got information up on the screen, so I know we have some of the Interdyne BMI customers. We might have some Tridea customers on here as well. And so information on both. If you need to get a hold of us, there's some email addresses there. There's, of course, phone numbers to call if you need us or if you need help. Of course, you probably know someone at either company that you can contact directly. But if you have questions on upgrading or if you do want to talk about getting upgraded, then certainly let us know, and we can get somebody to work with you on that and move you to one of the newer versions.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you, Brian, and thank you all for attending today's presentation. And just kind of following up with Brian's slide here, you will be seeing an email from us a little bit later today with a link to the recording. So you can review this presentation on your own time if you would like to. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, and thank you, Caitlin.
Thank you all. Have a good rest of your day.